All right, you cannot overstate the value of having a reliable wind zero when shooting long range, okay? When I say a long range wind zero, that isn't just you're shooting up a plumb line at 100 yards, okay? That's one way of doing it. Having a scope level and making sure that, you know, your scope adjustment is truly only vertical when you shoot long range, that's step one. The other aspect of having a reliable long range wind zero is accounting for spin drift and Coriolis, okay? I can hear a lot of shooters groaning already, like, here we go with this nerd shit, you know, spin drift and Coriolis. They're so small, do they even exist? Well, you know when something small matters is when you're comparing it to zero. All right, and this gets to the wind zero. So suppose you have between spin drift and Coriolis, let's say there's 1 minute of angle of right deflection at 1,000 yards. So in a no wind scenario, if you shoot 1,000 yards and your sights are level and they're tracking plumb, you're gonna hit a minute right, okay? So what happens if you don't account for that, okay? If you're not maintaining your long range wind zero well, and you just say, screw it, there's no such thing as spin drift and Coriolis, and you just go with your 100-yard plumb line, and that is gonna be your long range wind zero. Whenever the wind switches from, let's say, a minute and a half left to a minute and a half right, and you don't know or you don't believe that you have a 1 minute of angle bias or offset on your long range wind zero, that's going to be very confusing, right? It's going to look like the wind is stronger from one side than the other, even when the indicators read equal, okay? And that is a very hard condition to shoot through. How do you know? How do you know if you should cut the wind in half when it switches sides? Well, you probably shouldn't, but it might look that way if you have a shitty wind zero, okay? Another aspect of this to keep in mind is if you're shooting on a team or any kind of setting where you've got to have your long range shots or your zero coordinated with someone else, you have to communicate and make sure that you're doing that the same, because, you know, some people will bake that correction into their 100-yard zero. They'll just zero a half minute or 3/4 of a minute left of the plumb line at 100 yards, and that's the strategy. Other shooters will just dial it on, you know, so when they're shooting 1,000 yards and you look at their scope and they have 3/4 left on there, that's their zero, okay? But if you're doing it different from your teammate, and let's say you have it baked in and he has it dialed on, or you're doing it different, it could be a source of a lack of coordination, keep you out of the center of the target. So these are things to think about with a long range wind zero. It isn't as simple as just I'm zeroed at 100, so I'm zeroed at 1,000. There are a few extra things to consider to keep you centered at long range.